Right,
Laura,
back to normal.
Laura, so returning guest, it would be great to get started with a little bit of your journey into primary veducation. For folks who don't know you and your amazing work, tell us all about it.
Cool. Yeah. So when I was a teacher many moons ago, I decided to leave the profession because when I became vegan, I had a real struggle with the curriculum and the fact that it was clashing with my ethics. It wasn't an easy decision to make. I loved teaching, but thought that was basically the end of my career. Didn't know what to do from that. And then it wasn't until my own 4-year-old daughter started school a few years later when kind of I had this idea of, well, she's now going to school to learn a curriculum that I wasn't comfortable teaching. And not only that, but they've refused to make her vegan food as well. So perhaps they need some kind of education. And I kind of had this thunderbolt moment, this lightning moment of what if I devised some kind of consultancy service that spoke to school staff about their curriculum and how they can be more vegan inclusive, and also supported kitchens and caterers to incorporate plant-based and vegan food onto their menus. And so that's pretty much where Primary Veducation came from. And at the time, I was the only person in the country doing this kind of consultation, I suppose, and so decided to call myself Primary Veducation and become kind of the UK's first consultant to schools, and not just schools, also universities, colleges as well, and just try and put some veganism into the education sector, really.
It's just amazing, the work, and there's so much I want to get into about it, and I'm sort of trying to hold myself back from sort of getting into specific things that you've done. But I just wanted to just pick up on a point that at the very beginning you mentioned that the school system when you were a teacher wasn't necessarily aligned with your ethics. For folks who perhaps haven't had a touch point with the education system for a long time, perhaps don't have kids or whatever, or their kids aren't quite in school yet. My little one, for example, he's not quite in school yet. He starts this September, which is scary and exciting. But what was it specifically like in terms of the teaching, the inclusion in? Was it all around the canteen, or was it much broader than that?
It was pretty much every aspect of school life, I found. So when children start, as yours little one will do, in reception, they start learning about the farm, they start learning about zoos, it's in all of the songs, the nursery rhymes. And as they progress and grow older in the school system, they'll be learning about things such as food chains and where animals feature in those food chains. And it was just a case of, in every single way that animals were used in the curriculum, it was promoting their use and abuse, and it just perpetuated this narrative that animals are here not with us but for us, even in so much as dissection when they get into high school, and the fact that when students are learning how to do sports therapy, for example, they have to delve into the world of animal anatomy, and it just seemed to me that everywhere in the curriculum there was a mirror of outside society, where zoos and aquaria were all seen as places that were okay to talk about and look forward to visiting. And even when they were learning about culture, so Spanish culture, for example, bullfighting was up there with colour in the flag, red and yellow, and everything just seemed to be talking about the use and abuse of animals. And then they would go into the canteen at lunchtime after having drank their milk in the morning, and it was just too much to bear, seeing hundreds and hundreds of children move through the UK education system and just thinking all of this was okay.
Absolutely. It's just incredible how pervasive, when you think about it in those terms, like you say, everything from songs through to school trips, it's just absolutely everywhere. And I imagine with no counterpoint discussed, just there's only one way, right?
That's right. Very little. I mean, when the children get to about 10 or 11 years old, they are expected to learn to debate. And so every now and then, some schools would perhaps get the RSPCA in, or somebody from the Animal Justice Project, and they would come in and they'd spend perhaps half an hour with the children talking about the fact that perhaps animals deserve rights, and perhaps they don't like being in cages, and then that lesson would be over, and that would pretty much be it. And in science, with food and nutrition, you would never get a balanced plate or a balanced view. It would be, some people are vegan, and that would be it. Yeah. It would be mentioned. It would be mentioned. And if, for example, 30% of the children weren't paying attention at that moment, then that's it. That was their vegan education gone. And so it just seemed to me to be just so obvious that schools needed to learn what veganism was and why it was important for them to understand what veganism was, because their vegan intake was increasing. Thankfully, as you know, we are a large social justice movement. We're growing exponentially. And with the demographic of people like yourself and my friends and peers who are vegan and have decided to become vegan at our age, we're now having children, offspring, vegan children. I've got 2, and they're popping up everywhere. And so it's really important now that schools, universities, colleges, all parts of the education sector, from nurseries upwards, they do understand what veganism is and how to just implement that and use parts of it to make their everyday practice and their curriculum more exciting and accessible.
Given how pervasive and sort of normal it was viewed to have animals talked about in terms of use at every level of education, when you stepped away and then you came up with this sort of wonderful idea of like, I need to go and help re-educate, if you like, the teachers and the schools and these institutions, what did that process look like? Did you? I'd imagine at the beginning you weren't having them knocking on your door saying, "Hey, I heard you're doing this now. Would you like to come and tell us what we're doing wrong?" Or was it a difficult process to do that? Was it parents coming to you, or was it literally you just knocking on doors and let's start from the square one?
It was mostly parents coming to me, because what I did initially was I actually just used my daughter's school as trial and error. Thankfully, they've got a brilliant progressive head teacher who's supported me all along. And I did my first training session on them, got the feedback, and then I did it at another friend's school, because having been a teacher, obviously, I knew a few people in the sector. Right. And just practiced on their staff rooms. And at a point when I felt comfortable enough to put myself out there, I started putting things on Facebook saying this service is available if anybody would like my help. And it was like, whoa, okay, all of you, right, okay, right. Wow. One at a time then. Because so many parents were feeling this discrimination and just at a loss at what was happening when their children were having to take part in chick hatcheries and such. And so what I decided was that I would wait for parents to get in touch with me, and then I would contact schools on their behalf, because I found that when I just contacted schools without having the parent's name or backup or influence, I'd just go into the junk folder and be deleted. Some schools would get on board with it and invite me in, maybe perhaps after the first email, but more often than not, it was a constant barrage. I'd email, I'd phone, and then I'd ask the parent to email, because what parents don't realise is that they have way more power than they know at school. I always liken it to your member of parliament. Their catchphrase is, "We work for you." And that's how we have to start seeing schools and educators and head teachers. They work for you. They're there for you, for your children's education. And so when it got to a point where the parents would then say, "I'd really like this," that's when I'd be more likely to be invited in. And I get why they were hesitant, because they don't understand what veganism is, and they've already got so many pressures in schools to be inclusive of children with special educational needs that does take up a lot of time, effort, money and finance. But what I tried to do is go in there with a happy smiley face, a positive attitude, and say, this is actually quite easy. And more often than not, towards the end, those sour faces would turn to joy, and they'd realise the message that I was promoting was just one of compassion and love and inclusion. And if you're a good teacher, then those things matter to you and you want to be better at it.
Over the course, like from that beginning to like where you are now, have you found schools generally more open? As it sort of like, you know, we sometimes in the sort of quote unquote vegan community probably feel like we've made progress in the time that we've been involved in it, and we can see that progress whether you've been in it for a year. You know, I've heard people who've been sort of vegan for a year say, oh, things have changed since I, you know, like, but through to people who've been 50 years and they can obviously see changes. Has that tracked with the education system? Have schools and teachers sort of, they're more aware than perhaps they were when you started? I
think ever so slightly. It's probably not as big as a leap as we would like, and living in our bubble, everything does seem to be much better than it probably is. I love living in my bubble, and sometimes it is disappointing when I realise that there is another world out there and I'm just chipping away so slowly at it. I think that there's basically a lot of work to be done. There are murmurs of humane education coming in here and there. There are lots of schools taking on things such as forest school and learning outside and education in nature. And I think that there is an umbrella of all of those things coming together, meaning that there will be a space for veganism to be more prominent in the curriculum in future. But because it's not really demanded of by the government or the Department for Education, or you know, the school food standards don't reflect that idea just yet either. I just think there is a lot more work to be done, a lot more. And that will only happen with either A, the government thinking, okay, we'll have this as a priority, or B, there being so many vegan children coming into schools every which way from every angle, and then schools won't have any choice but to adapt their everyday practice because of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd love to turn to the Vegan Society a little bit and your involvement with them. How did that come about? What is it that you're doing with the Vegan Society now?
So the Vegan Society have been quietly watching my work for the past few years with Primary Veducation, and realising that what I was doing out there really should have been something that they were focusing on, because obviously they've got the infrastructure and they've got the voice. They're seen as a real global contender in the vegan movement. And so when they decided that it was finally time to put an education department together, they advertised for the role. And obviously I had a couple of whispers in my ear saying, you know, if you wanted to perhaps apply for this role, we think that you'd be a really good contender and you'd really be in with a chance. And as I was reading the job description, it was quite funny. I was thinking, have they based this on me? I mean, obviously they haven't. They do everything by the book. But, you know, you see something and you think, I would be perfect for that role. And they'd obviously been looking at my work, and that had influenced somewhat what they'd been doing. So it was just a coming together of great minds, I think, and it was serendipitous, and it was the right time, and I got the job. So my official title there at the Vegan Society now is I'm the Education Officer. But more interestingly and excitingly, I'm also chair of the Vegan Society's Education Network, where I've been able to bring together vegan educators and those on the periphery. So I've got some authors and child psychologists as well, all vegan. And each quarter of the year, we have tasks that we complete together collaboratively and collectively. And we're hoping to meet up for an amazing vegan kind of convention almost at the end of this year. And it's just brilliant, because that means that where I'm lacking in experience, perhaps in higher or further education, because I'm primary trained, they can bring that. And so the Vegan Society now has fully launched their education department, which I am head of, and couldn't be happier, because it means that everything I was doing with Primary Veducation and all those job lists that I'd been meaning to do forever, but couldn't quite find the time, I'm now just ploughing through them and can already see that they're making a really big difference in the education sector.
Have things changed with the clout of the Vegan Society's name? You know, when you reach out to a school or you speak to an educator, is there an element of, okay, like we know who they are, and that's really helpful to your cause?
It 100%. I mean, it wasn't an easy decision for me to think that I'm going to have to let go of Primary Veducation, because I'd built it up from absolutely nothing. I'd written a book and been published. I'd won awards, I'd spoken at parliamentary meetings. It was a really big thing that I was so proud of, being the UK's only specialist consultant and vegan consultant. And it was lovely. I loved it. I loved the fact that there was a change, and logos changed, and it was a proper business that I was proud of. But yeah, like you say, the infrastructure and the staff and things like, I hated doing social media, for example, and now I've got a whole department. I just fill out a brief and they do it for me, and it was those kind of things where I thought, am I going to reach in fact, I reached out to David at the Vegan Business Tribe. He's almost like my adoptive business dad, and he is for everyone. And I said to him, look, how am I going to lose Primary Veducation? They've offered me this job now. And he just said, look, is this about you attaining your goals? Yes. Do you have things that you want to achieve? Yes. Are you going to do them more effectively and faster if you're with Vegan Society, or you stick with Prime? Yes. Yeah. Okay, David, I'll take the job. Yeah. And from then on, I've just hit the ground running, and I've already had 2 very successful campaigns, and the Education Network has already released a brilliant document that we've created, and so I now know that even though I miss Primary Veducation, that I've made the right choice without a doubt, because the vegan children and students, learners, all of them, they need people fighting their cause. They need people who've got their back, and they need people to be doing that now, not in a few years' time. And so I'm just thrilled that the Vegan Society did this at the time when I was striving for more, and I'm able to act out those goals and aims.
Like you say, I think it's one of those where you've created something that I can understand that they've said, oh my God, why are we not doing that? That's absolutely what we should be doing, and this person's doing such an amazing job. Like, why try and recreate that and compete? Like, it just, let's get Laura in. Like, it makes so much sense, and I'm so pleased for you and the work that you've put in. It's so well deserved, I think, to be viewed in this way. And I'm just so excited about what you're going to be able to do with that extra kind of support. Really excited.
It would have been awkward if I hadn't have got the job.
I'd love to met the person who did if you didn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, that would have been incredible. Like, who is this person?
Thank you.
And they must have been doing it pretty stealthily, to be fair. Because you're like the only person in the country who's doing this. In terms of like looking back, because obviously, I think the last time we spoke, it was at the launch of your Key Stage 1 pack.
Yes.
And just out of personal intrigue, and for folks who listened back to that episode and have heard of, this is your 3rd time on the show now, so if we count that one as a second, which I do, I'd love to hear how that's been received, the Key Stage 1 pack, because I just thought that was such a great piece of work.
Well, I'm actually just pretty much finishing the pack for book number 2, and Tina Newman, who's the author of Vivi the SuperVegan, she's now about to release her 3rd book, so more work will come. But yeah, she's been giving it out left, right and centre. I've been giving it to schools as well. Every time somebody buys it on her website, we have a little text message of how exciting we are. People all over the world have been buying it as well. We had someone from Australia just recently purchase it, and I just think once the pack for the 2nd book comes out, and then eventually for the 3rd, then it will just be such a stellar example that any school can use of how to just think about vegan issues, environmental issues, animal rights issues, all but just beautifully put together in an exciting and enchanting book, with this work that will further key skills for children, because that's what it's about at the end of the day. Yes, you can read the book and have a nice little debate for half an hour about whether or not we should eat animals. But if you're learning to do your spellings or your handwriting, or you're learning how to use idioms or similes through using this book as a device for learning, then that's what it's all about. And that's when teachers will be more inclined to use them. So I just think it's a brilliant thing, and I love Tina for having written the books. And bring on number 4 is what I say. So thank you so much for hosting that. It has had a really great reception out there in the public, and I just want more and more teachers to buy it. And in fact, the Animal Justice Project and Nigel over there, who's amazing. Big shout out to Nigel. He does brilliant work getting those books into schools, and for every book that goes into school, they get the pack as well. So the more that anyone can share news about that is great. You'll see loads of stuff from Nigel and Tina, both on Instagram and other social media platforms too, I'm sure.
Have you had much response from teachers who've used it? I'm always intrigued as to like the impact upon, because I totally get, and I'm in that camp of like the parent who has the vegan child who wants their child to be included. That camp, like I can totally imagine being in, because I am. But the ones I'm really interested in are teachers who've perhaps maybe reluctantly come to it, maybe not really understood it at all, then got hold of that pack. Have you had much feedback from those folks and about their change of viewpoint?
Do you know what? That is something that I honestly cannot answer, because feedback tends to, if it's either gone back to Nigel or gone back to Tina and hasn't reached me, or we haven't really had that much. But in actual fact, that would be so useful, because it would also inform how we perhaps design the second and third pack also. Job list. Get some feedback. Do you know, because you're absolutely right. You know, in teaching, in the world of education, reflection and feedback are something that if you don't do, then you're not considered a good teacher, to be fair. Either by yourself or by Ofsted. And so, very disappointingly, I cannot answer at this point. But that is something that definitely by the next time we speak, I'm going to have a list of teachers who we've reached out to.
We have to get on that mission. I'm just fascinated by it, because there's obviously there's teachers out there picking up that Key Stage 1 pack, and I just love to know what happened, how did it go?
Would I.
Has your viewpoint changed? Because I bet it has. I bet there's some teachers who've really been impacted and perhaps thought through things differently. I can't imagine it's just vegan teachers who've picked it up. It's probably teachers who've got a vegan child in the school and they've had a conversation with the parents.
It's mostly the pack and the book are mostly sent out to parents who have signed up to the vegan inclusive education map that our colleague Ruth Jenkins has devised. So anytime any family who has a vegan child in school can put their name on that map, and they'll instantly be sent loads of stuff to the school. And that's where kind of the Excel sheet of schools and names and addresses of head teachers and whatnot all came about. So we're all working together collectively to try and push this through the door. So of course, knowing cause and effect, I think it's absolutely scandalous that none of us have ever thought to get some feedback. What are we doing? I guarantee you this will be the next step.
Well, glad to be of some sort of service.
Thank you for that.
I was fascinated, so I thought somebody's going to have said something.
Do you know what? I guess it's just so exhausting putting it out there and getting people to use it and read it and appreciate it and see the value in it. But once it's gone, it's just like, woof, okay, job done. But there's always more to be done, and there's enough of us now. We're like a little gang. It used to be just me. Now I've got a little gang, and with the Education Network as well, then there's no better time to really just run with this and get as much value out of it as we possibly can.
super exciting. I think that's the bit that excites me most about all of this, is that I know you're an incredibly creative, hard-working individual who's just got so many great ideas, and now having some of those some people around to support that, it's just like what is possible. It's just it's mind-blowing. Talking about what's possible, I'd love to talk to you about the petition that you've got ongoing, which was the reason I wanted to speak to you in another episode, because another piece of amazing work that until I'd seen I hadn't joined all the dots and put put the twos and twos together, and seeing the petition, I was like, again, like, oh my goodness, is this not a thing? How do we get this off the ground? So tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, of course, this is really exciting. So a while back, when I was at an APPG meeting for vegans and vegetarians, so that's all party parliamentary group meeting. We don't like acronyms. They spoke about, was plant-based food on public sector menus? If not, why not? And we had a great discussion about it. And so I started a petition to ask for plant-based food in schools. Sent it out a few years ago, and it probably got about 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 people, and then it just died to the wind. But then when I started at the Vegan Society, and of course knowing, the reach that they have, as you've mentioned, it just happened to be around about the same time that somebody who I'd never met, a gentleman called Aaron Browning, he's a vegan granddad, he had started a similar petition to the one that I had. And I'd seen them go around the block. It wasn't just me. There's loads of people, and they only ever got to about 4,000 or 5,000. But this one had about 9,000. And I'm thinking, okay, so that's good. That's good. What if I used the Vegan Society in my new position, my role, to perhaps get this to 100,000? Because I know from experience, and anybody else who's done a petition like this will do, that the government just write to you when you get to 10,000 and say, we ask schools to make reasonable adjustments to cater for vegans. And that's it. That's all they ever say. We put the onus on the school. It's up to the school. And it's no wonder schools are saying no, because if the government don't tell them to, then why should they rock the boat and make more work for themselves? Some schools do if they like to be inclusive, but the majority are happy with the way things are. So I devised a mini campaign. It's called Vegans Unite. Because what I wanted to do was bring together basically just every vegan in the country to sign this petition to get it up to that 100,000, because if it gets into Parliament and MPs get to talk about it and it's a real discussion, well, we've got vegan MPs in our arsenal. We've got Kerry McCarthy, we've got Christina Lees, we've got members of Parliament who will fight for this and get this motion moved. So perhaps this could become law. And that's what we want at the end of the day. We don't want this grey area of government saying to schools, well, it's your decision really. You can or you can't. Whatevs, we don't care. We want black and white. It is against the law if you discriminate and do not give vegan options. So Vegans Unite is about getting this into Parliament, getting it spoken about, getting it changed to law. They've done it in Portugal, so we know it is possible. And so I just wrote to everybody, and there have been some real big hitters who've shared it so far. On the 1st of May, it launched. And then on the 1st of June, the 1st of July and 1st of August, there's going to be a big push. I just chose the 1st because it's the easiest to remember of the month, basically, because the petition runs out of time on the 17th of August. So far we've had Viva share it, Surge, who did a guest blog, which I wrote for them, the Animal Justice Project, Kerry McCarthy, MP, there have been so many people who have shared it, and it's so far with, to say that we launched it on the 1st of May, it's now, I've just had a look, it's 19,405 votes in. So I reckon if we get to 25,000 by the end of this month, which is possible, I think it's really doable, then by the time this comes out on the 1st of June, there should be another huge push, and we could potentially get this one going. I just don't want to see another one fail, because it's such an important issue. And if this gets passed by law, then who knows what could come afterwards.
Forgive my naivety here, but I'm just like understanding the sort of the landscape of this. With other dietary requirements from a legal standpoint, is there any other dietary requirements written in based on like faith or based on, you know, allergens? Like, are there precedents with similar laws?
Yes, so there is a sheet that you can fill in, a form. It's called the Special Diets Request Form, that you can send to a school to say that you would like either halal or kosher, or if you have an allergen, and that is to be abided by. You are fully discriminating if you do not give for those reasons. And in fact, way back when my school initially said that they weren't going to cater for our daughter, that's what they came back to us and said. If it was a religious request, or if it was something to do with an allergy, then we would do it. But because you're vegan and that's just a lifestyle choice, that's why we're not going to do it. And so we want to put ourselves as vegans on a par with those religious requests, because in actual fact, because of the fact that the Human Rights Act sees our belief as worth protecting, we are actually on a par with people who believe in a religion. So it is a bit crazy that it's not 100% included, and it is that grey area. Schools need to make reasonable adjustments.
I was going to mention that, so because there's an obvious gap, isn't there? There's veganism being a protected belief in law, and then not required education to actually provide anybody with an option. Yeah,
schools are discriminating without realising it. And this is why some parents get so upset. I've spoken to so many angry, upset parents who just think, my child is being discriminated against, my family is being discriminated against, and the school just doesn't understand this, because they look at the school food standards. The school food standards is basically the how to do your school food. And if it doesn't say it on there, then we don't have to do it. And so schools are following what they believe to be right, but indirectly discriminating at the same time. It's absolutely mental as far as I'm concerned, because there's this contradiction. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And also because of the fact that schools can so easily make adjustments to their menus, and it can be implemented so easily, and that the vegetarian option, which has to be provided for, thankfully for vegetarians, can just perhaps maybe have one or two things changed to make it vegan. It's so easy that I just wish schools knew. And that's part of my job, is telling them that basically, you know, it's not in the school food standards yet, but we are protected, so you're discriminating, and this is how easily you can do it. Ta-da! But there's, you know, it's a lot harder than that, unfortunately. But in saying that, the fact that vegetarians feature in the school food standards is great, because they were seen as outsiders and different, you know, way back when, a couple of decades ago. And so we are progressing, we are moving forward, albeit at a snail's pace. But eventually, whether it's through this petition being successful or not, there will have to be eventually some kind of vegan offering or plant-based offering. I think, to be honest, it'll be more likely to be a plant-based offering due to environmental reasons, if it's brought in eventually, than it will be for either animal rights issues or human health issues, and it being a vegan menu that's being implemented. I think the plant-based thing is the one that will clinch it for our community.
I was going to ask you that question, actually, because I had a similar discussion with Tim Thorpe from the Vegan Society when we were talking about broader campaigns. And we talked about when you're talking with politicians, when you're trying to make change, and the question I was asking is, what is the most effective way to communicate with them, or the most effective argument that they are prepared to kind of go into bat with. And he talked about really that governments have a responsibility around climate, whereas they don't currently feel they have any other responsibility to the other aspects. I mean, you could argue the health one, but then there are healthy omnivorous diets, technically speaking. So they don't feel they have that responsibility, but they do when it comes to climate change. And so that was with those folks was the one to target. Has that been your experience from an education point of view as well?
Yeah, definitely. In so much as looking after the environment is now part of the curriculum, and learners are learning about sustainability. So it's right there. I mean, I went into visit a school in Greater Manchester recently where they were having a day talking about deforestation. And I went in to talk about how cheap meat is a contributor to that deforestation. And they're just a lot more open to it. I think if you're born with an innate love for animals and later on in life you become vegetarian and then perhaps vegan, you just, that never goes away. But if you're an adult who does not feel any warmth or affiliation or connection to animals in any way, shape or form whatsoever, it's going to be quite difficult to use the animal rights stance to try and encourage somebody to take up veganism. But nature is something that everybody loves. We know we've only got one planet, and people feel as though they should be doing better, not using plastic. That's been a huge campaign that everybody around the world is really looking at, and I just feel as though people are more inclined, if we used plant-based in the environment, to sit up and think, oh, I can make a difference, this is something that's important to me. And unfortunately, as much as a vegan who went vegan for animal rights might feel, it doesn't sit right with me, it's just not the right conversation, like I wish people cared about animals as much as I do. I feel personally that as long as people are becoming vegan and making good choices and these kind of conversations are coming onto the curriculum, then that's got to be better than nothing. So I'm more than happy to go into schools and talk about deforestation, but then always link it back to animal rights and human health, and for all of the reasons that one does become vegan. I just wish that the word vegan wasn't revered so much in the media. They've got a lot to answer for in that respect. In fact, I was asking if I could speak at an event later on in the year, and they said, well, yes, actually, but because we've got quite a lot of farmers, could you not use the word vegan? Could you use plant-based instead? And instead of getting angry and thinking, well, veganism is this and protected belief, well, yeah, of course I'll come, and of course I'll speak about plant-based options, because we know that it's one and the same, really. So, yeah, the curriculum can talk about the environment, and vegan teachers can then bring their veganism into that, and then the kids will grow up and they'll watch YouTube and they'll make their own informed choices, because there's just no escaping it now, really. The messages are too important and it's too vital. So, yeah, vegan or plant-based, one or the other, let's just move forward.
You've sort of segued nicely to a bit of a personal conversation that I wanted to seek your advice on, and I thought, well, what better place to do it than in an episode of a podcast, which is, in your experience, schools that are in more rural locations that are perhaps surrounded by animal agriculture, where maybe many of the pupils' families are actively involved, have you found that a more difficult challenge for you going into that school to speak about, when perhaps the teacher, perhaps the head teacher, etc., is feeling that there is a potential rift to be had? And how have you kind of overcome that? Asking for a friend. Yeah,
so this is something that I have experience in. I remember being in a farming community, and one of the teachers during the Q&A at the end asked me, do you think my children are evil because they eat meat? But I think the more time that I've spent speaking about this issue, the more I can be earthling ed about it. I don't want to insult, offend. I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to debate. All I'm asking is that the vegan viewpoint is considered. And so I just make teachers in those rural communities appreciate that it's a member of your community who has contacted me. Somebody who lives amongst you and loves living amongst you has just asked if I could just explain what veganism is. It's important to them, and don't we all just want to get along? And so what I answer to that question, for example, was, you know what, it's just, we've obviously explained how food is produced differently to our children. That's all. And it's about just being diplomatic, being calm, being consistent, and listening as well, because I think people are so quick, especially on social media, to jump into arguments. I had a conversation with a seal farmer on a social media platform last week, or perhaps it was the week before, where I'd seen a picture of some seal clubbing and I'd written underneath something like, I'm heartbroken, how is this still happening in this day and age? And then this gentleman came on and started talking about Indigenous people and their rights to hunt, and we finished the conversation by recommending books to each other that we thought would be handy for each other to read, because I wanted to see his perspective more and he wanted to see mine, and we'll perhaps never meet again, but I've got these books on the way. And that's kind of the approach that I take with these schools, especially in rural farming communities. But I also talk about the fact that I would love government subsidies to help farmers move from animal to crop farming, and that's something that I promote and I'm really keen to promote. And so they feel, I think, more comfortable inviting me into the setting when they know that they are my views. I'm not the enemy. Veganism is not the enemy. We're actually a solution. And that's kind of how I move forward with those communities. And I'm more than happy to visit them. I love a challenge.
I think that's a fantastic point, because, you know, as a parent of a child going into that kind of a situation, I'm almost, you know, embattled already. I'm almost sort of prepared for there to be a fight, when really, like, what is it that I want? I just want my son's point of view, which ultimately at this stage in his life is my point of view. I accept that, but I want that to be considered. And like we said right at the beginning, that if you're going to talk about animal usage, that at least there's a counter view that has equal weight in the discussion, you know, that it isn't just a cursory kind of, and there are people that are vegan, like you said. That's all we're asking, right?
Indeed. And in fact, Boris Johnson, our current Prime Minister, recently brought in some recommendations for teachers to be less biased, because he was offended by some children in Nottingham who, when they were learning about heroes, wouldn't, I think it was influential people, they wouldn't speak about him favourably, and he caught wind of it. So in response to that, he's just brought in these he brought in some government guidance for teachers to be less biased, and I think that works in our favour. I wrote a blog about it actually for the Vegan Society, because if we're expecting teachers to be less biased with regards to political issues, then veganism is covered here. So if you are going to mention farms, you'd have to counterbalance that with sanctuaries and zoos and sanctuaries. You know, there's the counterbalance basically. But what I recommend for someone like yourself who's about to step into the education system is just open that line of dialogue in a friendly way. You're going to support them. You want to be there for them. You'll happily run and get vegan marshmallows last minute. You'll do anything possible. I just think that at the end of the day, teachers are humans, they're people, they're busy, they're stressed. If they can just see a friendly face saying beforehand, if you could perhaps not do this, but do this instead, or if you could perhaps say that and not that instead, and just keep that line of dialogue open, then it's going to be better for all of you. The last thing that you should do is sit at home seething, thinking, oh, she's done that, or he's done that again and again and again, and not saying anything and getting angry and wound up, because more often than not, teachers don't like to get things wrong anyway, and they'll kick themselves if they know that they've hurt the feelings or ignored or excluded your child in any way. And one of the things that I'm doing with the Vegan Society and the Education Network is we're building a bank of resources that parents like yourself can use. So what we're doing for this quarter, for example, is we're creating about 40 letters that parents can download and edit, all about the subjects you'd imagine: chick hatcheries, butterfly hatcheries, zoos, this, that and the other. We don't want them to do this, that, la, la. Just like all of the, I've asked the whole Education Network, from dissection all the way down, what subjects would you like to just write to your teacher and say, we understand that you'd like to do this, but perhaps you should do that instead. And that's what we're working on, so that we can support vegan parents and vegan learners. So you are going to be able to have loads of support from the Vegan Society moving forward, as well as a document that we've just made that's a guide for educators on how to be vegan inclusive. So again, using those resources, but also keeping your happy, supportive dialogue open, it means that you probably won't need to worry as much as you are doing.
Laura, I honestly cannot thank you enough, and on behalf of probably lots of other vegan parents, I'll extend that thank you as well. I think that it's just so reassuring to know someone with your experience and kind of the amount of effort and time and energy you've put into this is kind of on our side, if you like, when we go into these discussions, and then we're not navigating this alone, because it's a scary prospect. And I know this came from probably you encountering it yourself at the beginning and sort of solving for it, and I just think it's amazing that that's now got to the level it has, and I'm thankful for it. So I want to say that before we close. It would be remiss of us not to tell folks what to do, what the call to action is that we want around this petition. I know we're going to put a link in the show notes so folks can head to it, but I will let you sort of close us out with what is it that we need to go and do. Oh. It might be as simple as sign the petition.
Well, yeah, I mean, signing it is definitely the first thing, and I implore anyone to use all their addresses, your work addresses, your personal addresses, even your Hotmail address from when you were 19 and it's like Diamond Geezer or something like that you realised you couldn't use as an adult
Could
anymore.
you not give out my email address, please?
Sorry. So it's just, you know, the more times that people can sign it, the better. And also tag your allies, your vegan allies as well. You don't have to be vegan to sign this petition. You can just believe in inclusion and the fact that plant-based diets should be on menus. So at the petition is at petition.parliament.uk. But you can also find it on the Vegan Society website and on loads of social media platforms, because loads of people have shared it and loads of organisations have shared it also. The campaign is called Vegans Unite. So if you go to the Vegan Society website and just put that in the search bar, you will find it, or go straight to the parliamentary petitions page. We're currently at 19,407. I've just looked. But more importantly than signing it, please, can you share it? Share it. Because it's just the more that we can get the word out there that this is happening. I wouldn't say it's our last chance, because obviously if this doesn't work, I'll just think of something else moving forward. But it would just be nice, considering all the effort that I'm putting in, and the creator, Aaron, as well. I'm delegating loads of work to him also. He doesn't know what's hit him, really. It would just be great to just get this to 100,000. It really would. It would show, and that's why it's called Vegans Unite, because it would just show that, you know, we're coming together, all vegans, all vegan allies, the family members of vegans. It would just be so wholesome if we all did this together. So please do sign and share.
Amazing. Well, I couldn't say it any better than that. So head to the show notes, do what Laura just said. I love it. Laura, thank you so much for your time.
It's
and
my
we do.
Pleasure. Anytime, Jim. I absolutely love this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.